So growing up, I always kind of knew that my family was different in the sense that we spoke French at home, and the food that I would bring to school looked a little bit different than everyone else. Right. I was like, they're not making like ham and cheese sandwiches for me. Right. And so I always was kind of aware that I had this like heritage from a global standpoint, but I don't think it was until high school when I realized what that actually meant for quality of life. And so that's when I really started to consider like the resources that I have access to and the education. And like I went on my first trip alone abroad when I was 16. Like all these opportunities were things that are very, very tied to the fact that I was born here and literally not in another country, especially Congo. And so I think kind of that awareness of that difference in life made me a lot more interested in like, okay, what is like international development and what does like global development look like with that?
So energy access was one of your early interests too. How did you get introduced to that I guess that grand challenge?
No, it's funny because 8th grade, we had to do a project in my science class. And I don't even remember what the topic was, but I think you could choose anything. And my team did energy access in Congo. And I was like, oh, well, I'm Congolese. Wow. So maybe we can like look into this. And it just like, from there, I had this like seed planted in my brain of like, that's something to keep in mind.
So, it's major. Of course, NC State is big on grand challenges. We talk about things that impact the world. I love that. And when you talk about even your cultural background, because a lot of people, like for me, right, I'm African-American, my family is from the South. I don't really have any international connections that I can directly kind of reach out to, right? But that being said, for me to kind of have that experience, I have to go overseas. But you growing up in a household, it's almost as if you had one culture in your home. But then when you left your home and went to school, it's like a whole nother culture.
That's exactly what it was.
Right. So it wasn't even like a second thought after a while. It was kind of just natural.
Like I always knew that I wanted to do something that had a global context because I was like, I just can't imagine not seeing the world when like 90% of my family is in another part of it. Like I know that I want to go out and do things. So,
What do you think what do you think that adds to your lens as it relates to problem solving though? Is there anything, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but like, is there anything you would say that, hey, for someone who, for instance, have lived a monolithic type cultural upbringing in their life, what would you say to them that they could gain if they were just to kind of like diversify in terms of their cultural experiences?
I mean, I think having that cultural experience just makes you consider things in a much grander way a lot of the time. So an example is right now I'm taking this grad class that's pretty much on how like the power grid in America works. And obviously with all these like net zero carbon goals by 2050, everyone's like, we need a 100% renewable grid. And so whenever I'm in that class and we're talking about these things, I'm always in the back of my head like, okay, well, what if this was like Sierra Leone or another country? And like, how do you build a completely renewable grid when there isn't maybe that original infrastructure to begin with? Like, what does like the transition to clean energy look like? And so even just an example like that, it's like, I'm always thinking about things on this like bigger level and not just like in the context of the problem.
And you're aware of what you don't know, because I think like you could be in a position where you don't know something, but then you can be in a position where you don't know that you don't know. You know what I mean? And I've even heard people say, you don't know that you don't know that you don't know. And that's just like so far removed from even considering things that if you had some of that exposure already, at least your mind can consider some of the other ramifications of whatever it is you're designing. So I love that. I love that. That's great. So you got to NC State. You started a major in electrical engineering. What are some of the things you did to sort of round out, or you're doing even, to sort of round out your education as a student that you feel have helped you?
Definitely travel, honestly. So great thing about State is they have a lot of study abroad programs, a lot of funding for abroad programs. And so I've been, to Rwanda, obviously, but I also did off-grid solar installations in Nepal and also in Nicaragua while I was a student. And kind of funny backstory is like I started college in 2020. And so the world was shut down and I was like, I'm never going to study abroad. And I literally was like, I have to get out of the country at least one time while I'm in college. And I've done it like 7 times now.
There you go.
So that was like a sharp goal coming in.
And you're about to be out of the country very soon. I know we're coming up on spring break. You're going to
Southern Europe.
Man.
Through NC State.
There you go. Another sort of like study abroad kind of experience.
It's through our honors program.
Got you.
So.
There are people who are watching this who may be currently in college or maybe getting towards the end of college, and they may feel like, I don't know if I have made the most of my college experience. Right? So I want to kind of maybe talk a little bit about that. What would be sort of your top 3 things that you would say, hey, here are the ways that you can make the most of your college experience as you have, right, from your vantage point?
That's a good question. I feel like regardless of whether it's academic or like personal friendships, just pursuing every opportunity, since you don't know what's actually going to stick. So like there's a lot of times where like from a personal standpoint, like randomly meeting up or hanging out with someone that I like didn't know previously. And that ended up being like one of the best friendships that I've had in college. And it's stuff like that where it's like, you don't know in foresight. So it's like, you might as well just try it and see. And then even from like an academic standpoint, like those travel opportunities, like I went to Nepal December 2021 when they were like, I think a yellow or like dark yellow country on like the recommended travel list.
Oh, wow.
And like I had to petition state and like write this whole thing of like why they should let me go and fund me. Yeah. So it's stuff like that where it's like, I didn't know that was going to work out because we were still in the middle of a pandemic, but I really wanted to go. But I tried it anyway and it ended up working. So yeah, I would say just regardless, like if there's an opportunity, like personal, academic, professional, just pursue it anyway. Because you don't know what's going to happen.
Can you tell me maybe a story about one of the experiences you had abroad that sort of had an impact on you and really sort of changed your outlook moving forward?
That's a really good question. And I've had several, so I'm trying to think like, what is the most significant? I would honestly say going to Nepal. So that was the first trip I did when I was in college. I went through the Green program. And so they're a non-university affiliated study abroad program that focuses specifically on sustainability. So they focus on like water conservation and they have trips to like Iceland because they're 100% renewable energy. And so went to Nepal December 2021 for about 10 days. And I took a class on renewable energy in Nepal, but I also did an off-grid installation that was a little over 5 kilowatts at a village in a place called Dharmachar. So it's like 5 hours from the capital. You can see the Himalayas from the village and it's like so pretty. Wow. We drove up a mountainside and I was really scared because there's like no railing and I almost fell off a couple times. Right? I was like, this is a little risky.
Why they do that,
I come back. Right.
I got you.
But it was great. And I think that experience was really significant for me because I've done service, like community service and like other things, but that was the first time where I did a project where I was like, wow, like these people's lives are changed like significantly for a very long time. Yeah. And so the system that we built was going to use solar energy to power an agro processing mill. Yeah. And so before that, people were having to grind wheat and like a lot of their farming was just like there was no technology component to it. And so having that mill that can now process all the things for them and do it like much faster. I mean, it had so many outcomes. Now there were girls and I mean, even young boys that could go to school before that couldn't because they were spending all that time in like agriculture and focusing on food production. Yeah. There were women in the village that now had access to kind of that like technical learning since they were going to be the ones that were maintaining the system. And so there's just all these outcomes that I'd never seen from something I did before. And I was like, wow, like I really actually had hands-on involvement in something that like significantly changes the daily life of someone. Yeah. I was like, this is crazy. If I can do this the rest of my life, like that's amazing. And so definitely that trip to Nepal, I mean, it just showed me that there is high impact work that exists out there. And like STEM truly can be used, not just for the progression of like, I don't know, making cool technology, but actually like changing people's lives. So yeah, that did it for me.
You know what I'm saying, Joe, we gotta let that breathe, man. I say, and I've shared this in one of my, my talks that I frequently do, 3 questions that you cannot afford not to ask, right? Not to ask and therefore answer. Yeah. Is number 1, who am I? Number 2, what do I want? Yeah. And then number 3, why does it matter? Yeah. And that's what you're kind of hitting on to. Like, it matters not just because I have this title or I'm going to be on the front of a magazine or people going to remember I'm the inventor of XYZ, right? But like, there are people's lives who have been significantly improved by the work you've done. Like you're studying this stuff, not just for your degree, but for you to have insight to change someone's trajectory in their life. Someone across the pond, so to speak. Yeah, yeah.